Fine. So I'm the pastor of TC211. So as the camera's on, you might have seen that. And it's my pleasure this morning as host to welcome Scott Simmons, who is the Chief Standards Officer of OGC. And as I think you'll have picked up during the week, OGC are a sort of major collaboration partner of TC211, with a strong interaction between our standards and theirs. So most obviously are the ones where they do the work and then we adopt the standard afterwards, but there's a more complex set of relationships as well. And so we do like to give, and pleased to give space to Scott on our plenary to give us a catch up on what's been going on in OGC. So I'll hand over to him now, and there you go, over to you. Welcome.
Oh, great. Thank you very much, Peter. And sorry, folks, my voice is almost gone this week, so it'll be kind of pitiful listening to me, and I apologize for that. As noted, Peter and Mats, thank you so much for inviting OGC back to do an OGC session. We find these sessions really valuable. It gives us an opportunity to highlight to the TC211 community some of the work we've got going that you may not be aware of. But also, as I'm here all week listening to what's happening in TC211, ideally in the slides, I'll speak to things that have sort of been synthesized over the course of the week. So before we jump into the details of the session, I just want to, one more time, make sure that everyone recognizes the sad passing last week of Jeff de la Bourgeois, 2 weeks ago now. Jeff is the editor and author of the web map service, WMS ISO 19128. So he is more than famous in the standards community. He wrote the most famous geospatial standard out there, just about. He was a winner of OGC's Gardell's Award, our most major award back in 2013. And then this year we were able to honor him with the OGC Lifetime Achievement Award. And he passed away from ALS, Lou Gehrig's disease. He and I this summer got together to give him the award at his favorite pub in Boulder, Colorado. I think that last stat there is hilarious, though. 7% of all OGC web traffic is just for WMS. One standard, 7% of all of our traffic. So it's a pretty remarkable guy. So today we have a really excellent set of presentations for you. I want to give you quickly a brief on some things, catching you up on what's going on at OGC. And then my colleague Harsha was able to put together 3 speakers from the local community in OGC, 3 OGC members who are doing really clever work to show you how they're using standards in context of their operations here in India. OGC runs something we refer to as the OGC India Forum in partnership with Department of Science Technology, Survey of India, and others. And the OGC India Forum has been a vehicle for communication about what's been going on in India for, I think, 2 decades now. So the OGC India Forum is very active, and these members can help represent the great things happening in India. And then Ivana Ivanova will be joining us remotely to talk to us about some of the work that you're quite familiar with that she's been doing, but some of the OGC context as well. And so it'll be great to have Ivana at the end of our session. So quickly update from OGC. We had a fairly busy time since we all got on May, publishing 9 standards and quite a few other documents. Amongst those standards, a few that are quite important, the City JSON Community Standard, which is a JSON encoding of City GML 3.0. The OGC Training Data Markup Language for Artificial Intelligence. Dr. Yue Peng here in the back of the room was the primary editor of that standard. Interestingly enough, it's the first international standard published in artificial intelligence in the marketplace right now. So if you need your training data considerations for artificial intelligence, it's a really nice standard. And some more query and security issues, an extension of sensor things for citizen science, which is really quite interesting, and a major overhaul of the CDB standard. I could spend the next 4 hours telling you all about that. If you're interested in modeling simulation, let me know and I can talk to you a lot more about what's going on there. Number of engineering reports primarily associated with our test bed and some of the space work we're doing. Wherever you see 3D plus, That's dealing with extremely precise calculations of satellites on orbit relative to the Earth's gravity field. And so some work we've been doing on gravity modeling and precise 3D positioning of orbiting bodies. Discussion paper on disaster early warning mechanisms. I think it's 6 pages, so everyone can read it. Brilliant work coming out of Taiwan. And 3 new working groups. GeoParquet Standards Working Group, so to work on the GeoParquet vector format, cloud-ready, cloud-native format. A GeoZar Standards Working Group. ZAR is a very common cloud-native data cube encoding, and this will standardize the geospatial parameters to put on ZAR data cubes. And a new domain working group in general about space standards, primarily looking at space situational awareness and space traffic management. That does include, of course, what I described earlier, precise orbit calculations, but also interbody travel. So when you leave the Earth's gravity, but you haven't quite got to the moon's gravity, where are you? All those kinds of considerations are spatial and geospatial even in nature. Member meetings, we were in Huntsville, Alabama in the US in June, Singapore just in September. We'll be meeting the week of 25 March in Delft in the Netherlands, 17 June in Montreal in Canada to celebrate OGC's 30th anniversary. And since it's also 30 years of ISO TC211, I'll have a birthday cake for ISO as well. And then October, November, we'll be in Asia Pacific region. Details to emerge soon. All ISO TC211 members are welcome to attend OGC meetings. So you're all invited and you can all participate in any of the working groups. So if your organization is not an OGC member, that's your secret back door into the meeting. Brief update on the OGC APIs because everyone's kind of curious where they're going. And my discovery earlier in the week is this slide is virtually impossible to read on the screen in the room. So sorry about that. But the top OGC API commons, so the common building blocks that all the other ones build upon. First part is done, and now we're doing a second part on data management. OGC API features is adding the last aspects to make it completely replace web feature service in functionality. So the filtering and the create, replace, and update and delete functions are being finished. OGC API maps, so web map service equivalent, wrapping up soon. The next parts of OGC API processes and work, including a revision to the core. OGC API styles. So if those of you familiar with style layer descriptors and style encoding, using some of the OGC web services and in ISO 19128, this is a replacement for that works across the entirety of the APIs in 2 and 3 dimensions. Tiles, which we heard yesterday in the JAG, and the plenary, we're still working tiles, and it's all my fault, and I'm sorry. More work on records, so a new cataloging and record retrieval service. Routes, so an API for doing route calculations as well as a route exchange model. More on coverages, discrete global grids, moving features, joins, replace the table join service, 3D geovolumes, the common interface API to all of the 3D standards we have, and some more work on sensor things. It's a lot. There's a pile going on the APIs, all highly orchestrated by Dr. Gobe Obana on OGC staff. So he makes sure that all these are harmonizing and ensuring the modules are all mutually compatible and interoperable. As I noted, it's all my fault. ISO 19177 part 1 is just waiting on me to get a document to Mats, and then Mats can make you all happy and he'll get all the credit and I will finally get away from the blame. It is published in OGC, so you can download the standard, it's out there. We're just having some issues with getting it into the ISO format. But you will soon see that, and I'm not, I think, supposed to talk about it once you see it. A little bit more on sprints. So OGC, as you're probably well aware now, in conjunction with TC211, we always run 1 code sprint a year, and then we do other code sprints over the course of the year. These code sprints have become integral to how we develop standards. In a code sprint, the developers show up, they work against an emerging specification, they try to implement it on the spot, and in 3 days, they've been implementing the specification, they've been testing it, and we change the specification, adapt it, such that when it's ready for final standardization, it's already been deployed, it's already been coded, it works, it's incredibly successful. It cuts standards development time by about 75%. So it's down to like what used to take 4 years can take a year. And it also means that the standards are very useful when they're done. We also this year just started offering what we call a code sprint in a box. So it's a completely packaged code sprint, everything you need to do your own code sprint. We will give you the resources, the tools, all the guidance on how to operate it over as many days as you want. You just take the code sprint in the box and just take off and do it. And the very first one we just did was for OGC API processes, done primarily in Germany by a couple of our university members, where they could test an API without OGC staff having to help them, without any other overhead. And they're very effective and really simple to use. And if you are younger than me, you get cool credibility because we do it all in Discord instead of GoToMeeting or Zoom or anything. And so we're hip and cool. And that's something you don't usually hear about OGC. We also did a code sprint late October, November over Halloween in London, just on general open standards, looking at our MUDI encoding model. That's an underground data definition language. Looking at a new defense imagery format being developed by the United States that will be used in the avionics of all military aircraft in most of the Western world, as well as a number of other sources, and then a bunch of the other standards, and doing those all together in conjunction. Highly successful. I think we had 70 people in London and another 100 or so online in that code sprint. And a bit more about innovation, our collaborative solutions innovation program, doing a number of projects. Testbed 19's wrapping up. The last presentations were made 2 days ago in Washington, D.C. on that one. Those recordings are all on YouTube already. We have completed our 2023 Federated Marine Spatial Data Infrastructure pilot in Singapore, Arctic, and Caribbean, looking at offloading and onloading of freight in Singapore, and offloading and onloading of ugly people in the Caribbean who are on cruise ships. The same thing if it's a container or a person on a cruise ship that behaves the same way. It's not very cooperative. And so we did a lot of work on these issues. A climate resilience pilot that's leading to some new work on disaster management. So these two pilots have now been linked together to a new pilot moving forward. We just, as I noted, held the Innovation Days where we talked about all these projects in Washington, D.C. Go to YouTube and you can find recordings of all the debriefs. And we're about to stand up an open science persistent demonstrator dealing with demonstration data and services hosting those data that are persistent. They'll stand up for years, not just for the length of a project. So if you want to learn how to use OGC API tiles to deal with satellite imagery, there will be piles of imagery persistently available to you on this demonstrator for years and years to come, and so you can test against running services. And all of our partner member organizations are encouraged and allowed to help stand up their own services that will link through this persistent demonstrator. So if you want to look at an Esri versus a Hexagon service for OGC API tiles, they'll both be available. And I noted climate disaster resilience all merging together to a new pilot this year. The call for participants just went out, I think, yesterday. So if you're interested in proposing against that project and working on climate resilience and disaster topics, it's now open for your bids, and it's very well funded. So there's a lot of money available to you as members to go do cool research. And I think, I'm losing control. So thank you very much for your time. That will highlight what we're doing on OGC. We'll leave questions to the very end if you don't mind, because I want to make sure all of our speakers have adequate time. And because I can't talk well today, I'm going to be really slow. So with that, the order of speakers is next we're going to have Vijay Kumar, the Chief Technology Officer with Esri India, here to talk about some of their work. So Vijay, I've got it all set. And let me get back to this mode because we're sharing. Just either better.
Thank you, Scott. Thank you, Scott. And it's my great pleasure to share my thoughts. And thank you, ISO and OGC, for inviting for this talk. I'm Vijay Kumar, CTO at Esri India. I would like to share our experience with OGC standard in India and outside globally. So I will repeat this, that open vision, we carry open vision which is taking from local to global. We believe that sharing, collaboration, and interoperability are crucial to addressing today's challenge and urgency. I think that's what all of us are, putting efforts, and that's a vision we carry globally, which is a very significant vision when we architect and design our products and solutions, and based on OGC and other open guidelines. So why, just a thought that why an open platform is essential. So if you see this, I mean, there are initiatives evolving, expanding, which are energizing the market. There are integrated geospatial infrastructure and, SDIs. There are geospatial knowledge infrastructure in talk in many countries globally. UNGCIM, all of us are aware, is doing great, work and, created an integrated geospatial information framework, which is quite innovative and useful for many, countries. In fact, for most of the countries. And European Strategy for Data, Open Data, Inspire, and other programs are really, doing well. We talked about fair data principle, right? In last couple of discussions, which is also becoming kind of accepted, kind of a norm everywhere with all data providers and with all consumers, data consumers. All standard supports, I mean, organizations working in this OGC, IHO, ISO, and many others. I think it's a big, it's a great time, for this, and everybody is actually, conversing, together. That's a really great sign and good for everyone. Okay. No, it's okay. Thank you. We also talked about system of system pattern. See, what is happening that when we talk about open vision, open standards, typically it is, percolating to a pattern called system of systems, we call it. So what happens that whether you are talking regional planning initiatives, you are in region, multiple departments are collaborating, or you are setting up a foundation data initiative where you want to set up open data portals and you want to set up and share data across, topical initiatives or whole of government collaborations, in fact, are happening. I'll share a couple of examples with you, which are really great examples from user perspective, which are founded actually, which are based on open standards and OGC and other ISO standards, multi-level collaborations, whole of business collaboration, emerging hub network. I'll have one slide around that also, which is very interesting, a concept emerging in our experience, kind of hub network. Then NSDI, all of us are aware, world regional initiatives, marine and Arctic SDIs, which is also, integrating into this entire effort, and sustainable development goals, which, is in talk for many years. And I think a good experience has emerged out and evolved, that how open standards and how collaboration is helping us in achieving the right objective. So it's a kind of a system of system pattern, we call it, which typically has 4 pillars. If you see on the left side, the governance, the data and technology, of course, and capacity building also is being addressed here very well, and engagement, which is actually the end outcome, that how different organizations, different stakeholders are engaging together. So this is really quite big, large outcome when we go with this approach. And typically, sorry, I'm really sorry. Yeah, I had to tap this. Thank you. Yeah. So it's really great to hear Scott in the morning, that he talked about what are the various initiatives OGC is taking globally, and it's a big transformational step. I should say that transforming from web services to web API, open API concept, which is fundamentally really very powerful, and it's a need of the hour. And I'll not go in detail in this slide, but if you see, there's so many standards, web services and other data standards work have been done in past so many years. And now I think entire, standard set of standard is moving or migrating to, web API, which becomes actually, quite convenient for every stakeholder to use and consume, as well as, time to utilize, time to consume, time to design and develop and migrate also becomes shorter actually. And this is a really great concept. I'll not go into detail, but I request that, this is a great detail of documentation is available here. We should definitely go through that, Just a snapshot of this. When we are exploring OGC APIs, if you see, typically I think almost all areas are getting covered and thought about. So right, starting from tiles and feature service, and as Scott mentioned, that entire standards are moving to that. API level, which is really a big step. And I think even the user feedback is also very positive. When we talk to users, implementation or project people, it becomes quite important and useful actually for them to adopt this and then implement it faster. So I think entire life cycle is actually reduced. The time is reduced to adopt this. And as I said that further movement is also, the time is reduced. When we want to migrate to new versions, enhance new things, I think it is really very effective, time effective and cost effective approach. So thank you, OGC, for that, thinking that in those lines. It's really great. Geospatial infrastructure is emerging rapidly. So as we are talking about geospatial infrastructure, typically, horizon is really widening, connecting organizations across borders, jurisdictions, and sectors. So geospatial infrastructure is becoming kind of a collaboration, or hub, kind of a various, users and stakeholders across the borders, across the government and, departments and states. Typically, what is geospatial infrastructure carries, typically, if you see, the fundamental, principle behind it is authoritative content, right? We have distributed and federated architecture. This is also interesting, we have distributed as well as federated. So which makes actually, governance quite robust. So what happened that if, let's say, there are 20 or 30 departments collaborating together, every department is owning their piece of work. They can edit, they can publish authoritative content from their side, while others are also collaborating, in the same data sets or in the same services, which has become kind of a very interesting and collaborative architecture. And we experienced also in many countries when we implemented federated architecture, and across multiple departments across the countries. So open and secure. This is also interesting aspect, that is open as well as secure, right? At the same, easily discoverable and directly usable also. So all standard metadata APIs and, it's all supporting FAIR principle, as all of us are talking, which is very important today, and very well accepted. So it becomes kind of a system of systems, in fact, when we talk about this. So whether at the country level or regional level or any level we would like to architect this concept is actually universal. It works actually across. It's dynamically integrating all content, enabling decision-ready information products. It's a great actually when we implemented this with many customers across. And I would like to just slide around it. What is our experience across ArcGIS system? So what is happening? Today, geospatial standards or open standards are very important, and they're playing important role in every part of the life cycle of the project or implementations. It's starting from produce. When we produce data, we create data, we do editing, right? When we publish data, services. When we collaborate, we do collaboration, with people and partners and with different departments and stakeholders. When we share information and open and secure, content catalogs. When we use and reuse, that also become kind of a, interesting concept. And then interconnect. So I think across all the, stages of life cycle of the, project or implementations, open standards makes, become very important, today. We can't really pick one or two and then ignore the rest. The entire life cycle has to be entire processes, life cycle, or all the stages need to be addressed. And thanks to our entire team, global team, that entire ArcGIS system, we have put in effort to address actually all these open standards at every level, every stage. If you see in detail in the top, including domain data model, metadata, web services and APIs, security, encoding, catalog and search. I think all life cycle of our components we addressed in our an entire product suite. So objective is to give actually an offer and implement open and secure and implementations which are really usable and which gives a lot of collaboration effort and efficiency. Just one slide around this. At one of the large implementation we did actually around sustainable development goals. Where multiple countries are contributing and collaborating. In fact, this is a common framework, and more than 30 plus countries have been participated into this, and then having a common infrastructure around this. So it's supporting global monitoring, around certain KPIs and around certain goals, as all of us are aware. So this becomes quite useful actually on the ground when we talk about the standards and open APIs in the back, but in the front end for the end stakeholder and users, this becomes very, very useful and efficient. So pattern in practice, I mean, just an example. I mean, California State Geoportal, we experimented and implemented. Great example where so many departments are collaborating. I think 35 plus departments are collaborating into this portal and in the same architecture. So great experience, in fact, and great feedback from the users also. So ArcGIS makes sharing easier. State collaborative hubs. So I talked about the hub concept. So idea of this is that when you have multiple stakeholders collaborating, so I can set up a hub where it's a system of systems again. Multiple organizations, they create their own hub, which has different data sets, different services, which has different applications also. In fact, sharing can happen based on the design and configuration, and then everybody is collaborating together. So it becomes kind of a hub concept, which is really becoming very interesting. And many sites we have done community collaboration also. In fact, every citizen, I mean, depends on what is the use case. Even citizens and various stakeholders can also collaborate in the same hub. For example, when we talk about, let's say, New York or various other in India also, we experimented this where you have let's say city hub, city geospatial hub or collaborative hub. So in fact, citizen can also participate in various initiatives. So it becomes kind of a very robust architecture, and this is a good experience across the world. So thank you very much, in fact, and I would be happy to take any question if you have after the session, as Scott suggested. So thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Vijay, and thank you, Chris, for the. I feel better. So I have to tell a quick story on Vijay that casts you in a good light. So you're okay. Don't worry. Vijay is a long-term friend of mine here in India. And I mentioned on Wednesday, if you were in the Standards and Actions seminar, that we performed in OGC India Plug Fest back in 2016 and 2017. Very successful. And Vijay, superhero of the Plug Fest, because he and his team came to us and said, we've got a web feature service up and running. Hexagon has a web feature service up and running. And one of the feature data sets we can't ingest in each other's systems. We can't connect that piece of the feature service to each other's systems. And we implemented it right. Hexagon guy says, yeah, we implemented it right. And we tore into the standard and realized, you want to get super nerdy, multi-point data sets were defined in such a way in WFS that they could be implemented two different ways and still be meeting the requirement. And in fact, by bad luck, the two biggest vendors in the entire community had done it in different ways. No one had discovered that in 15 years of WFS services running until that Plug Fest. And thanks to Vijay's team finding that, we got it all solved and we updated the standard and all is good and nice again. So that's why those Plug Fests are really valuable. So Vijay, thanks for that, because that was amazing. All right, hang on. Give me a second. So I'll bring up the slides in a moment here. Next, we have Thaiseer Parammal from SatSure. And Thaiseer, let me get your slides up. I have you totally ready. I actually know what I'm doing. And you should be able to advance that way, but you may have to click.
That was yours.
Yeah.
Thanks. Yeah. Hi, everyone. Thanks. Yes. Yeah. Thanks, ISO as well as OGC for giving this opportunity to give this presentation. So myself, Thaiseer, I head the engineering at SatSure. I have one small slide on what SatSure does and what is the like the company portfolio, right? I'll skip that. Possibly you can look into the website and get more details on what we do as a company, right? Getting into the session, right? So we work with a lot of government organizations, banks, different other institutions, right? And what we have identified is there is a lot of missing standards across the industry. Now, with geospatial standards being a common input data for almost all the new insights getting generated out of different industries, right? These missing standards are playing a big role in accelerating the development. For example, data gets generated at different sources. data get stored or maintained by different variety of sources, and everyone follows their own standards currently. So when we especially talk in Indian perspective, we work with a lot of state governments separately, and each of the data stored by state governments, they don't follow like the OGC standards or anything like that. So that is where standards become very important. Where if you integrate an API with a government source in a certain state government, if they follow the standard, that becomes the same for even central government as well as the different any set of governments which we work with. So currently that is partially followed. Some states follow it, some state doesn't follow it. So that is where the open standards become very important in accelerating the development, where it becomes a plug and play kind of implementation for almost all the industry players for implementing any kind of geospatial based decision intelligence. Going to anywhere, role of standards specifically, that is what I was just mentioning in terms of having the common language across the industry for talking each other. Coming to the open standards, right? So we use a lot of standards in geospatial industry, as well as within SatSure, we use almost 17-18 standards across the geospatial data formats, APIs, and things like that. So out of that, I've taken 4 common standards which we operate with our vendors, right? So one of them is, as Scott was mentioning, web map services, which is there for more than a few decades. So web map services, it's good that now multiple services like web map, the features, all those things are getting into the OGC APIs. And moving forward, possibly this will get replaced by the OGC API with all the new standards coming into place. Second one is Geo API and Stack, right? So Stack, with the recent announcement getting into the community standards of OGC API, I hope OGC API and Stack API as a specification, right? That parallelly will have a collaborative roadmap in terms of implementing the new standards, because we currently feel that OGC API and Stack, they have a lot of things in common. Almost it's kind of a subset. But since Stack is followed as an industry standard across the EO data industry, we are forced to follow that standard along with the OGC APIs. So Stack is one of the common standard which we currently follow for all our EO data products which we internally generate. And since it is a community-driven specification currently under OGC, I hope for a collaborative parallel roadmap which gets more into a streamlined manner. Yeah. And cloud optimized geotips, right? So that is another data standard which we use across the organization. And currently with the industry moving towards the cloud for all the data infrastructures and things, right? So cloud optimized geotip is one of the open standards for data format, which we currently use across for any kind of data storage, as well as connecting it with the APIs as well. The power of standards, right? As I was mentioning, with this different kind of standards coming into picture, we can flow the data very consistently and seamlessly across platforms. So as he was mentioning, Esri having an API and Hexagon having a separate API. So once we have standard and standards following the FAIR principles, right, it becomes very easy and a streamlined process for having consistency across the APIs. And once we have consistency, that is when innovation becomes accelerated. So every company within the industry can follow these standards and innovate in an accelerated way. I think that's it from my side. So as Scott was mentioning, we'll questions towards the end if you have any. Thanks.
So because I'm moderator, I get to do whatever I want. And so I want to make a comment, because probably a lot of you have heard about Stack or are familiar with Stack. And You've probably noticed I never talk about it when I brief things in OGC because it's the S word. We don't talk about the S word, but Stack is actually OGC, a profile of OGC API features. So it is fully compatible. And in fact, the first code sprint we ever did in 2018 was to develop the OGC API features, what then was being called Web Feature Service version 3. And we did it with the Stack community. So we invited them to our same facility and we did a joint code sprint. And in that sprint, ensured that both Stack and OGC API features would be 100% compatible for the future. And so Stack is just OGC API features with a catalog attached to it. Now, Stack has decided, the community has decided they're stable. They have a version 1.0 release. And so they've asked to bring that into the OGC as a community standard. So that means it will be endorsed, but the more important thing is it means it gets frozen. So if you've implemented Stack, version quote 1.0 had like an alpha and a beta 2 and a beta 3, and there are 5 Stack systems out there in wide use right now. So by getting it into a community standard, we'll get to 1 Stack, and then hopefully everyone's happy. As well, the Stack community works very closely with OGC API records, which is our new cataloging standard. And so Stack is right now a pure subset of OGC API records. And so you can take a Stack catalog and another OGC API records catalog and search across them in a common fashion. So as much as you hear about Stack, and the Stack community is very good about promoting what they're up to, it is still all standards based and it's all working quite well now. So the S word is addressed now. We don't have to talk about it again today. But it's been a challenge because the community does not see these relationships very clearly, no matter how much we blog about it. So do recognize that it's developing and very, very aligned. Just that I mentioned earlier, we have a new space standards domain working group standing up. It's companies like SatSure and a bunch of others doing very clever things with technology and space technology now that were beyond what we used to do that are helping drive this new domain working group. All right, real quick. So thank you, Thaiseer. And the final presentation in the room, and then we'll go to an online presentation. I have Rajan Srivastav, the CEO and founder of Heliware. So I have your slides. You may have to touch. You never.
Hi everyone. So myself Rajan, I'm the founder CEO of Heliware, and thank you so much OGC for providing opportunity to present Heliware in the front of. So what we are proposing mainly is how OGC based standard helps startup like us to build a solution rapidly and use it in the various use case. So what we do that we can that you can check on the website. So I'll just put it. So as you all know, in the last few years there is a various kind of geospatial application has been evolved due to the rise of sensors. So earlier we had very limited kind of sensor, but in the last 5 years. So as on that, even the internet IP get converted in the form of GIS. So that database, the companies, how they are keeping that IPs in the database should have some kind of geospatial standard so that it can be utilized by each and every company. So this is like how what are the standards currently OGC have. The new thing which I have liked so much, like OGC API standard, which has been like just evolved in the last few months. Apart from that, I also propose some kind of new standard for the video and 360 mobile mapping and panorama data set and CCTV also. So how we can link the CCTV and panorama directly onto the map without evolving that, and how can we set a standard coordinate system for the 360 panorama so that if people are creating 360 from mobile mapping or drone, they should not have to worry so much, and like there should be some standard coordinate system for that it get directly linked with my mapping system as well, whether it's 360 videos or 360 panorama. So as we all know, so how it helps? So it has a various file format, and again, the file format is being supported by the various open source platforms. So if companies follows the OGC standard platform, then then they are mainly platform independent. They can change their system whenever they want. So last year, like as here also in India, Indian government has released the Indian geospatial policy. They also has followed all the OGC standards. So over the time, hopefully in the next 2-3 years, we will see all the major government department, even though from traffic to police to municipal corporation, they will all link with the OGC standard document. Because as Vijay sir has suggested, like in India, there is a concept called one map. So, but the various departments have the same kind of database system so that it get easily linked to normal people and the department so that it can get onto the map. So this the same thing which we have done in the defense. So we have, by using the OGC standard, we have built an ecosystem for defense. And so what we realized, they have the last 20 years of database, and there is a data of soldiers. So on the mobile app, soldiers are using it, and on the cloud side, mainly the defense scientists are using it. But whatever the file format was so much, there are some file format system which do not exist right now, and they wanted to put those 20 years back file format onto the system. So one thing I will propose more, like companies, like there are various companies who set the OGC standard file format, but that is not, you can say that is not platform independent. So we are working on something so that if someone have a standard file format, whether it's for the 3D, B3DM or SKB, it should get supported by the various platform. I should, like a company like me, I'm mainly focusing on the small and medium scale company who can use their file format, and then we have the open source mapping platform. I have the file format which can be linked with this. So that I can build something good for the society using the in very low cost system. So that is what we propose. So thank you so much for your time. Thank you, sir.
So a couple of really important things, and what was a fantastic part of the presentation is this talk about how you use standards to build a small, new business. And it's good to have someone actually prove what we keep saying, that these standards can help you enable business even at your earliest stages. Right now, OGC's membership makeup is about 40% commercial, right? So we have about 40% commercial members, 30% each government and research and academia. Of the total membership, close to 10%. So almost a quarter of our industrial members are small business startups. So we have lots and lots of startups joining OGC all the time. And a lot of them are finding these standards just enabling. A standard doesn't have to be the man bringing it down, putting all the rules, making everything hard. It can also be a lubricant and just make things easier, because if you follow, you don't have to figure out how to do that some other way. Someone's already figured out that. So it works out really, really well. So yeah, thanks for that. The other part that was a little subtle, but people should pay attention, is video. Standards of video and geotagging of video and use of video in spatial context. We really don't have good standards for video that are accessible by normal people right now. There are some really sophisticated and brilliant standards out there, but they're really, really complicated. So I know, Don, you've worked with the Motion Imagery Standards Board. This is a standards board in the US that deals with all types of spatial things around video and multi-frame capture, et cetera. But the lightest of those standards is still the most intense thing you'll ever read. They're very heavy standards, but they were written many, many years ago when the hardware was very sophisticated and complicated as well. And so the military drone is not the little DJI drone you buy now at the supermarket, right? And so what you can expect those systems to do versus what systems do now, there's a real need in our community for some lightweight standards in the video realm. And so any suggestions you have, we will take on. Because we got a little bit of time, I'll keep adding one more bit to that. If any of you are paying attention to OGC's joint working group with the World Wide Web Consortium, W3C, the Spatial Data on the Web Working Group. We are in that group. We've developed it's not a recommendation, it's whatever is lower in W3C speak. It's the equivalent to like a best practice in OGC, something called WebVMT. And so WebVMT is a video tagging, geotagging spec, really simple, very elegant, meant for Some single viewpoint video, right? So 360 is not included in that. So it needs to have some sort of frameable reference of what you're looking at. But it's a really nice, elegant, and web native specification out there. There is some desire to standardize that, but we need the community to really take it up. So more on video is great. All right, fantastic. Thank you very much, Rajan. And I'm going to start bringing you into all of our meetings to talk about how you enabled your business with standards, because that's good. And finally, online, we have Ivana. So first, I have to stop my share. All right, Ivana, you should be able to share your screen. Excellent. We see your slide organized view. Nope, we have your presenter view right now. So if you can swap. And we have it, but if you're speaking, we don't hear you. Ivana,
maybe if I unmute myself.
Yeah.
Yes, that's awesome.
Ivana,
Thank you.
Curtin University. Thanks. Go, Ivana.
Yes, thank you, Scott, and thank you for having me in this session. And from this title, which is quite boring, it's not really obvious that it has connections to the OGC, but I'm sure you'll recognize there is a lot in common. So, well, let me begin. My name is Ivana Ivanova. I'm a senior lecturer at Curtin University in Spatial Sciences, and this is a presentation about the what I think great use of ISO 1900 series, of which a lot are also OGC standards, for to better serve GNSS community. And things I'm going to present here are a result of two consecutive projects, with first one being first time in my life I have been actually receiving research funds for my standards expertise. So it was in 2019 when I realized that well, funders are actually quite keen starting to take standards for geographic information seriously. I mean, more funders, not I don't say that they weren't before, but so it's a combination of, well, it's a work with various partners, but main partner in this research and the one that commissioned this work on GNSS metadata profile is Geoscience Australia, and it's Positioning Australia National Positioning Information Centers division. So what we wanted to actually look at was whether existing series of standards are enabling a fair GNSS data and service use to the current GNSS end users. And by current, we mean those that are actually taking up GNSS or positioning more and more. And these come from not only the scientific domain as usual, also geodesists or geophysicists, but they were coming from domains as wide as you know, tracking lost elderly or seeding machine from precision architecture, agriculture, and similar. So what we wanted to do is to actually, and these new sectors have been recognized worldwide. So what we did, we wanted to actually understand who these users are. And in our research, we concluded these users are not necessarily geodesists, but they are those that are looking for data. They are able to actually determine fitness for their use, and they know some places where data are. And these places are the spatial data infrastructures that used to be called this way, and nowadays, well, something similar. So a catalog, well, entry points to official or any spatial data provision. So what we were researching, we were looking at what sort of information these new end users from various different GNSS domains want to see. And as you can see, it varies across domain sector, but from those terms, the suggestion is that it has a lot to do with some sort of quality description of the GNSS data and service. In this preparatory work, we were looking at the ISO 1900 series and some related standards, and we're curious about two things. What's the support of these standards for FAIR? So how findability, accessibility, interoperability, usability can be enabled with the 1900 series. and what is their support for user requirements as indicated in our survey and research. So FAIR support is superb, I should say. So it's very good because, and which is not a shocking knowledge. It is because 1900 suite has been designed to enable spatial data to be findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. But support for user requirements, as indicated in earlier slides, is very, very poor. And as you can see, this is very small letters, but just follow the green ticks, and those are in which standard support which metadata requirement for GNSS data and service. So we were also looking at trying to identify what needs to be done per sector, and we did these overviews indicating gaps and suggesting improvements. And as you can see, we concluded that the biggest issue is to have enough quality metadata so that our users are confident in decision on their fitness for use. But not only that, we have end users are actually just one segment of the GNSS data and service use. There are many more actors in the GNSS value delivery chain. So they are upstream providers, component manufacturers, and so forth. And they all have requirements for the user-specific standards, protocols, for what it means for them that something is findable, accessible, interoperable, reusable. And they also want to be able to actually develop some sort of trust in where they put their data and where they source their data from. So after this step, what we did a robust survey to actually confirm our earlier realizations, where we were asking over 100 GNSS users from various roles of this GNSS value chain as what do they think, what it means for them to be findable, accessible, interoperable, reusable, and what sort of assets do they offer, what sort of communication technology they use, what software they work with, which protocols they interact through, and which standards are they using, and which standards they are actually seeing emerging and paying attention to as a forthcoming potential replacement. And we did this across all the sectors. But not only that, we've also taken our earlier learnings about user requirements, which are being monitored across GNSS sectors worldwide. And we've asked current GNSS users in Australia and New Zealand, what do they think about metadata elements indicated, the units used, and the values actually as provided. And as you can see from these two examples on the left, that it comes from spatial and surveying community. I should say we've actually indicated this for various application uses. So say, if it comes to dealing with smart cities or digital twins, these are the elements we think you are using, and these are the values that are there. But for some of these, we couldn't actually identify. So our users actually helped us indicate what was missing from our overview. So we did this survey, and on this basis, we've collected everything, all the data, and processed this, and we actually embarked into our work using GNSS metadata profile. So this profile actually was indicated on the left is based on 1900 series of standards. And why was that choice? It was because, as I said earlier, end users are knowledgeable of repositories accessible through catalogs, and most of these catalogs that hold and offer spatial data are actually based on 1900 series because they have long-term tradition and they are well recognized. But not only that, we've based this on this series because it's a very, I don't have to tell you this, but as you know, it's a very comprehensive set of standards that are over 95 catering about almost everything related to geographic information. But we also wanted to actually make sure that the profile complies with the FAIR principles, and because of the local, of the locality of where this project has been done, we've looked at what is available in the most important resource used by GNSS users in Australia. So we've combined all these steps in producing GNSS metadata profile. We've also reviewed the FAIR principles and reviewed the obligation in most of the relevant metadata elements to ensure that whatever is produced as a record of GNSS data or service is fair. Now, in this little overview, I don't expect you to read it, and the on the right indicating the actual profile components is not even complete. I just want to say that not only we based the GNSS profile on the set of ISO standards we deemed relevant for geodetic data or GNSS data, but we also actually linked to another standard called Geodesy ML, and some of you might recall a user story on this from the past, and it's still on the website of ISO 26211. And we did that because a lot of our GNSS providers, not only in Australia, but worldwide, actually use components of Geodesy ML. So we didn't want to duplicate metadata already being stored automatically in this encoding, but we only wanted to say that they should be linked. And just a few highlights as to what we had to do to enable ISO 19115 metadata suite to serve GNSS products. So first of all, we actually had to manipulate the MD scope list, whereby we added 2 typical data products in there. So because we assume by default that anything that we record metadata of is a data set, and but not everything is a data set in GNSS world. So some of the things are data streams, some are specific data set, and so forth. So we had this to make this extension so that we could actually introduce a set of constraints in dataset identification, so that we are able to say, whenever your GNSS product is a site log, then do not produce extra metadata again, but just drag everything what is already stored with the site log enabled by Geodesy ML. And we did similar to extending the extent class by allowing the GNSS community language to be used, whereby define extent also with terms like global, local, regional, and these are well understood in the community, of course. We've extended service metadata by allowing to report on a fixed update type, power consumption, robustness, or safety integrity level metadata elements that are essential for some of the domains where GNSS is used. But most of all, what we did, we've actually addressed the gap in identified standards by extending the data quality model. It offered the data quality metadata model offered in 1900 series. So you see that how many elements have been added into what is already available. Now, this was quite possible because we had very good to the ISO 19157-1 on the development, so we made sure that we actually do comply with the rules of extensibility. Now, this is a conceptual model, what I presented, but we also are, we started experimenting with it by implementing it in the catalog application that's used by GeoScience Australia, and that is the GeoNetwork. And we are lucky to have, Evert supports to actually extend the existing templates with the current, very recent ISO 19157-1. And we have Byron Cochran, who is actually helping to produce what we call a GNSS metadata template, where GNSS producers will be able to actually fill in the record for their needs. And we have few examples of data and site logs, and you can see that what we get is, it looks like just regular metadata records, but this one is actually using the GNSS metadata profile and thus containing elements we defined in there. What is all these things for? And this is actually to enhance the way how GNSS data users do subscribe to services such as data streams or services. So on this slide, you see the current view on the data portal of GeoScience Australia's GNSS data repository, where users only identify station and a type of data and the day and the time period of which they want to actually get their feed from, as well as the GNSS data format. But when implemented with this profile, they will also be able to actually indicate where they are coming from, so which domain, and thus what their expectations are of the quality assured by such service. And based on that, the search will happen through the catalog, and they will be actually able to receive what a size subscription to their that fits their needs. Now, this is the last one. What are the next steps? Just complete and continue testing, and also work out some mappings to other schemas, because some GNSS providers are actually based on different standards, and this mapping is very well possible because of earlier works on the crosswalks between meta schemas that are available. We also produced some recommendations to GeodesYML, one of which being suggesting actually set up a domain working group within the OGC to actually start bringing in a bit more geodesy view on our geographic information standards, which is not as well embedded, but perhaps through the Space Standards Week it will be easier. And we're also exploring some of the IoT protocols, including MQTT for GNSS data delivery. And one of the foundational standards used there is the Sensor Things API, which is the OGC standard, and its MQTT extension. So that's all from me. I hope I didn't take up too much time. And as earlier speakers said, happy to receive any questions in the discussion session. Thank you.
Right. Thank you very, very much, Ivana.
Thank you.
And not to make anyone feel bad, but those of you who were not in the Wednesday session of Standards in Action, which was utterly superb, and you missed out, and you should feel bad about that. Those of you who were in that session saw a presentation on India's GNSS system that's going in live soon. And so those of you in the room who are working in India and might be working with that system, this work Ivana is showing you is really quite critical as we start looking at now for available systems for positioning, and we have to assess quality across those systems. Also note that there have been some presentations this week on LADM, the ISO standard, and the LADM survey module, which incorporates OGC's InfraGML survey module. I think certainly needs to consider these quality considerations with respect to the survey measurements. So Ivana, I think it's task number 2 for us is maybe we need an update to InfraGML and then on into LADM. So I think we have work to do. All right, before we go to questions, I'm just going to show Mats and Peter that I'm not lying to them. I really do provide birthday cakes. So at our September meeting in Singapore that we just recently held, we had a birthday party for the Simple Features standard. It's the 25th anniversary of OGC's first standard ever. So Simple Features was published 25 years ago. It is by far the most used standard out of our portfolio. So amongst our community, do you store feature data in a database? Yes, you're using Simple Features. Do you store it in a file? Yes, you're using Simple Features. Do you write features on pieces of paper? Then maybe you're not using Simple Features. But other than that, you are all using Simple Features every day. It's on your phone every single day. It's everywhere, totally ubiquitous. So we did a special birthday party, and that was a lot of fun. And actually, that is 25 years. I'm willing to sell you a special silver edition of the Simple Standard. So if you just email me for $19.95 plus shipping and handling, I'll be happy to give you the silver edition printed version on silver paper of Simple Features. So do reach out to me. Not at my OGC address. Do it to my personal address. This is a side business I have. So with that, I'd like to open to any questions we have in the room, and I'm going to get the ability to get those on the screen too. So if anyone has any questions for any of our speakers. Sorry.
We have a mic front here, and then are the roaming mics out and about already, or not yet? Yeah, so and come here and oh, there's one on its way. There you go. Come out of the audio room. So
thank you very much. Jan Yilmaz speaking. Ivana, all the things you presented about, tensions for quality and metadata. Have you thought of bringing them into the standards tracker? Because I think some of them were at least very valuable to a potential update of ISO 19115 part 1 and 2, and perhaps even your own data quality standard. Thank you.
I knew you were coming after me, Jan, but thank you for the question. And yes, I've been thinking about it. And when I started this, long before I started this work in 2019, and that was the year I was asked to actually lead the revision of 19157-1, I was wishing the standards is extensible as per what is allowed by the metadata standard part 1. So that was my primary intention, and I wanted this to be for producers to be, or for those implementing the standards to be able to define their own domain-specific requirements. And because there is no, I wasn't expecting to reach consensus on new data quality elements that come from a very specific domain and have different meanings in different domains. Then I didn't even think of making an attempt to bringing them to the standard. But because it is extensible, and because our part 3 is going to be extensible as well, now all producers will be able to actually implement the standards, the metadata provision in a standard compliant way with extended elements as it suits their domain. And I thought this is more fitting solution rather than introducing new elements, because we had that discussion also during revision of part 1 that people started to jump out with new elements that are very well defined in a very small domain, but can mean something else in a wider geographic information domain. So that's why no. Thank you. If I answered to your questions, I'm not sure.
Yeah, Jan nodded, so you did. Thanks, Jan. Paul, yes, sir.
That's working. Ivanova, also my question is for you. It's a kind of follow-up on the question of Jan. You know that we are at the ISO TC211 working on a JSON implementation of the 19115. You are also part of that project team. And since the data quality, the 19157 is a large part of the content of this 19115, the metadata thing. We also want to implement this data quality standard into JSON. Do you see a use case for that?
Yes. Use case in that providing example of the implementation, you mean that we were discussing in the project team?
Well, yes, but the use case of implementing the data quality standard also in GeoJ.
Yes, I see that importance. So that's why I was very happy that it was taken up as part of the metadata implementation, because I think data quality metadata is inherent part of the ISO 19115. It just sits in another standard, which is also fine. But if you look at the metadata overview of the packages, then one of the essential components is data quality metadata, which is linked from just different models. So it belongs there naturally, and that's why it's important to consider it. Yes, but how I understood your question is, do we see an example use case to actually show where this could be beneficial? And then my answer is also yes, because and I think we will be able to produce some quick examples, because in that implementation tool we have JSON output or interfacing to the metadata record as well, so we can compare what comes out of that and how it has to be modified to suit the part 4.
Yeah. Okay. So, thank you.
Thank you.
So maybe to follow up on that, Paul, but you said GeoJSON? Isn't that the absolute worst possible format, given it only supports CSS?
It will be plain. It will be plain JSON with the GeoJSON flavor on it. Or some detail.
Features and geometries JSON OGC standard emerging this in 2024. So JSON FG will have CRS support.
Scott,
So-
would you like to join the project and then discuss that matter with Clemens Portella as well?
Yeah. Well, Clemens is
you're
trying
kind
the
of-
other standard too, so.
we're happy to have additional OGC input. I think Paul Wood, as the leader of that project, that we've set a design principle, as it were, to have as plain a JSON as possible for wide use. We're testing that to work out even what we meant by the principle, I suppose. But yeah, we're in. Sorry to step in on Paul's project, but Clements and I were only discussing that yesterday. What do we think the principle means in the context of the samples that we've made so far? But we did consider that we have yet to run across any metadata where, in practice, which we felt needed the additional capabilities of JSON FD, but we may just have not found the use cases yet, I guess. I would say the title of the project that Paul's running does include the word fundamentals, which allows him to put out of scope anything that seems a bit too complicated in order to get something out there in a reasonable time. So it's not boil the ocean or eat the elephant, as it were. He's picked a pretty large section, but I have pretty much all of 19157 in there as well. But I think that's because the reasons Ivana showed, that actually users need some good data quality metadata in order to decide whether that's the data set they want to use.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So, well, there are some principles, like you said, and one principle is we wanted to make it as simple as possible, but we want also to make it as usable as possible.
Yeah.
So we want to include as much as is possible, but at the same time keep it simple. And this will be a technical report only. So, well, next steps might include some more detail and complexity.
Yeah.
Which is a lesson we've been learning from OGC, is try standardizing the simple bit first and making additional parts for whether we can have parts of parts in ISO, we'll discover as we go along. But yeah, so for the moment, it's a technical report about doing the simple stuff. If that sets us off in the wrong direction and we have to backtrack and use JSON FT in a later edition or something, we'll find out, I think, as we go along.
Quoting Carl Reed, quoting Thelonious Monk, simple ain't easy. So yeah.
Yeah, that's the balancing trick, isn't it? As if you head down the route that works for simple, sometimes that means it won't work when you need to do more complex things.
Yeah, I'm all for all the simple for everything except CRS, because it's not going to work in Australia and it's not going to work in North America if you use GeoJSON. Sorry. We've both gone, we're too far along now with dynamic CRSs, so that's gone. Any other questions before I take over and ask questions? All right, so I want to ask a question of Rajan here because he gave us a provocative title in his slides. We didn't talk enough about it, in my opinion, because we had a conversation before the session about gaps in standardization for video. And maybe if you could elaborate a little bit about what you think our community should be looking at now for geo video standards. If you could just sort of give a hint of a few things you think we're missing.
Yeah, so I personally think like for the 3D, we have tiling system. For the videos also, we must have some kind of standard styles or something like that, because the data which generated from the drones and all, they are very, very heavy. Sometimes it goes up to 10 GB and all. And if someone want to show it onto the cloud, then the standard conversion is that is not as per the standard. We have to compress it and all. So we are like in Heliware, we are mainly working on something to bring the tiling in video as well, and that should link with the coordinate system. So if I click somewhere in the video, I should able to get the lat long of that particular location. So you mainly trying to using the, you can say, centroid based panorama, centroid based coordinate system. So let's say if I have the video of 360 of this area, I know the coordinate of center, and I click here on this video. So using the triangulation, I should able to tell you what the actual lat long of that particular coordinate. So mainly solving the, you can say, your video compressing the file size system and also adding the video coordinate in that.
Okay. Yeah, because there is work, just really complicated work that Don and I have unfortunately had to look at far too many times. And Don, you know a lot more about it than I do, but there's some complicated ways to do that. But yeah, some simplification would be useful. The OGC is working on a new OGC API connected systems. So the connected systems API is a replacement for the entirety of the sensor web enablement, or a RESTful replacement of the sensor web enablement suite of standards. So everything from the sensor models to the sensor integration to the sensor interpretation, all in a new suite of APIs. And they're showing in that draft standard how you can get the kind of information you're requesting, but it may be an overly complicated way to get it to the user community. Because it first presumes that you know a whole lot about the sensors in the sensor network, which we may not know in other cases. And so that would be an interesting one to take a look at. So if you haven't gone, go to the GitHub repository for connected systems and take a look at what they're doing on, because they may be getting closer. And then the WebBMT thing has some of that, but yeah, okay, great. Any other questions? I'm gonna have to stop talking in a second because I'm gonna lose it. Oh, Chris, yeah.
Thank you for your presentations. About the use of standards, how much value or reducing your cost, overall cost, by using standards have you ascertained? So the savings that you've done using those standards as opposed to doing it, you're developing it your own. Have you got a total figure that you think that you've saved on development by using those standards?
So what happened, like when we use the standard like OGC standard file format and all, then again, it is quite simple to use and easy to integrate. So in terms of time saving and all, it is like very good for the companies like us, for the startup or small scale to medium scale companies. And like why to build something new standard, like as I mentioned, for the video and C60, because there was nothing. So right now the process of converting those big videos into the small is very, you can say, time taking for us as well. So we thought this problem might be facing by the other companies as well. So that's why we started working on it to solve it, this particular areas.
Anyone else? Because I hate leaving time on the table then. All right, one more thing, and then I'm talking about, because what the hell, I'm up here, right? So I can do that. But I do want to encourage those of you in the room that do a lot of work with architectures and bigger aggregations of diverse data. A standard that we've recently published, and I really think you should take a look at, as I mentioned earlier, is CDB 2.0. So for a super history, CDB used to stand for something, and I'm not going to say the words because then you'll think of them, but it now is just called CDB. And it was a standard that came out of the military modeling and simulation community. And its purpose was to aggregate all the kind of data you need to very realistically simulate virtually a real world occurrence. So a flight simulator, a ship simulator, a big part of it is what they call mission rehearsal. So when a Defense Special Forces organization goes in to do something, they rehearse all that on computers for weeks, months in advance. And so these databases are exceptionally high fidelity, and they follow something that community calls correlation. All the data layers are highly correlated as well. CDB is the container and has been the container for this from, I think, 17 nations in the world and a lot of other organizations to hold these data sets together. Low resolution imagery, high resolution imagery, 3D models, actual models of people and ships and airplanes and all that, all in a single package. It's super complicated. The CDB standard version 1.0 is 1,800 pages long. So you don't really read it casually. Some really clever folks in our membership have decided that 1,800 pages is mostly fluff, and it relies upon lots of non-standardized data sources. And so the whole system's been re-architected. And CDB 2.0, the core model, is I think on the order of 60 pages long and pretty much tells you the same thing. But it now references normatively a variety of ISO and OGC standards as the source contents. But why I'm encouraging people to read it is it's the most holistic, clean, and elegant way to put all your stuff in one container and be able to reference across the data layers as well as different scales. And so it has a built-in pyramiding paradigm that's really, really nice. And so if you want literally to find, put the key in the side of a truck to open the door, and the same set of data that they're using to fly a jet, 10,000 meters overhead. The same data, all those different levels of detail are all instantly accessible. And it's a really clever organization. My opinion, and it's my opinion, this is not official any OGC anything, is there is a lot of other work we do that could value from this sort of much more rigorous organization of content. And I think CDB itself could be a great organizing principle for a lot of the other work we do. So from an architectural perspective, I think it's really clever. I'm going to try to get something together for us when we get together again in June to talk more about this. But do take a look, CDB 2.0. It's clever work. Carl reads the editor, so it's all in Carlese. So if you can read Carlese, you'll be in good shape. It's really a good document. All right, well, if we have nothing else, thank you very much for your time. Thanks for your attendance today. If you do have any other questions, of course, our speaker is around and you can catch us in the hallway and such. And I'll sit in the back quietly during the next session and not mess up lots, but you can come talk to me. All right, thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, Scott.
Yes, I said thank you, Scott and Harsha too, for organising an informative last hour and or so. I've been making notes here of things I need to remember at home for on survey or in the near-term future of ISO TC211 as well. The immediate future, though, for those of us here in Delhi, we now have about half an hour break before we resume the TC2 plenary. For those of you online who'll be joining that plenary, it will be at 11 o'clock Indian Standard Time, which is conveniently in the afternoon for people in East Asia, and quite an early morning for those of you in Europe. And I'm sorry, North America, it's again the middle of the night, especially on the East Coast. I think we're starting at 12:30 a.m. for you. But I hope you can join us. We'll be having more presentations from our advisory groups and also voting on the resolutions, which you saw the text of yesterday. But some of the advisory groups will offer you the explanation as to why they want you to vote on them before we do the voting. The others that don't have any resolutions will come after the voting. So that's the structure for with the remainder of the day. Starting again at 11 o'clock Indian Standard Time. If you're in the room, I think the tea will probably be around on that balcony again. You'll probably find a cup of tea out there. Thank you again, Scott and colleagues from OGC.